That's an example of adding more value to your product or service. Now, there are better ways to add value where it doesn't cost as much. But if you do believe in your product and you understand the long-term value of a customer, you can add a lot of value on the front end.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Michael J. Barbarita Jr. is a seasoned entrepreneur and award-winning public speaker with over 40 years of success in retail, manufacturing, and service industries. Starting as a financial analyst, he significantly grew Ski Town USA's revenue from $2.5 million to $8 million annually within 5 years. In 2007, he founded Next Step CFO, a firm dedicated to helping business owners achieve more time freedom and consistent profits by implementing innovative financial and business strategies. You can gain insights into leveraging emotional and clear messaging to achieve market dominance and establish a compelling brand presence. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you here today. Before I get into questions I have for you on the subject matter, I would love for you just to share your story of how you became an expert in communication.
Well, back in 1999, I just sold my second business successfully. And this is going to sound like it's all in reverse order because my first business sold for multiple seven figures. And I felt I could do no wrong after owning and exiting two businesses successfully. I thought I had the keys to the business kingdom and that I could succeed at any business. So in all this glory, I started an outpatient rehabilitation facility called Freedom Therapy Center. Now, here's the thing. In all the successful businesses I owned, I always implemented business and financial strategies that my competition wasn't doing. And, some of those strategies we'll talk about today, but by way of example, my first business was a ski specialty retail business that I grew from $2.5 million to $8 million in 5 years. And a contributing factor to that growth was a strategy called a risk reversal, where the seller in the transaction takes most or all the risk. And one of the problems that the customer had in the ski industry is they never really knew if the ski they were being sold was the right ski for them until they got up in the mountain and tried it out. Mm-hmm. So we implemented what we call the ski guarantee. Ski the ski 3 times. You don't like it, bring it back for a brand new pair and keep bringing it back until we get it right. Now, keep in mind that as soon as a pair of skis hits the slopes, well, it depreciates substantially. Mm-hmm. It's like driving a car out of a showroom. So this ski guarantee was unheard of, and my employees thought I was out of my mind. But there was a couple of things. And by the way, my employees had visions of thousands of pair of skis coming back from the mm-hmm. field and them having to do all this inordinate amount of work and us losing a ton of money. But I knew a couple things. I knew my competitors wouldn't do it, number one. And I knew that the customer just really wanted a great ski experience. They weren't out to put one over on the retailer. Mm-hmm. So we sold 8,000 pair of skis the first year we implemented it, a 25% increase, and only 8 came back. The next year, we sold 11,000 pair and 14 came back. Now, fast forward to Freedom Therapy Center, where I must have taken stupid pills or something, because I did exactly what my competition was doing. I was marketing to doctors to get referrals. I was dropping off chocolate cakes as bribes to front office staffs to get to the doctors. I gave away 2,000 cakes one year. I offered services the exact same way that my competition was offering them, with no risk reversals, no compelling offers, no strategic direction, no differentiation. And I'm a financial guy, so I know how to manage cash flow. Despite all of that, we were incurring huge operating losses, and I was hemorrhaging cash. And I was funding the operating losses from my savings. And, then, how those, we business owners make these promises to ourselves. I promised I wouldn't put any more money from my savings into the company bank account. And I broke that promise, multiple times. And thank God I wasn't married. I'd be under the pressure of being told to get a real job. I was staying up nights wondering what I was doing wrong. I was waking up in the middle of the night with cold sweats, worried about cash flow and all the customers I was losing. There were many Wednesdays. There was no money in the company bank account. The payroll due on Friday. Employees were leaving. They saw a sinking ship. People we owed money to were calling left and right. There was personal liability galore. And then it just all ended. I fell on my face. And, I learned, after falling on my face, the hardest step to take is the step after the fall. And basically, that's one thing that I learned. And then 30 days after I fell on my face, I started Next Step CFO. But then the second thing I learned is that you just can't keep doing what your competition is doing. You can't message the same way that your competition is messaging. Great service, great quality, lowest price, years in business. I have a name for that we can get into later on, but you just can't keep doing that. And that's what I learned from my experience. And that's why I went backwards, because I was always doing what my competition wasn't doing. And then all of a sudden, I copied exactly what my competition was doing, and I fell on my face.
Interesting that, you actually had these successes, excuse me, but didn't kind of use that same concept. So obviously you learned from that, and you learned what it takes to actually be able to market your company successfully, and then, had this failure that you've been able to recover from. So I'd love for you to just maybe talk about how do you determine how to market properly, and become that go-to company that customers are going to see your message and know that it is the right one for them?
Well, that's a great question. I love those questions. So what we found is that the key to successful marketing was discovered back in 1931, believe it or not. And that is that you have to get into the mind of the prospect, and that it's based on two emotions. Number one, the problem they have they don't want, the solution they want they can't find. So when we were doing research for our book, Powerful Business Strategies, we went all the way back to 1931 to find that. And we felt that was a real key. And what we did is we created a formula based on the keys to successful marketing. And we call the formula the conversion formula. And it's a 4-step process. It's a 4-step formula. And it needs to be followed in the right order. And it can't be changed around. Like, for example, if H2O, right, is water, it's 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Well, if I gave you 1 part oxygen and 1 part hydrogen, that's not water. So you're going to follow the formula to the T and in the right order. So the formula starts with what we call Captivate. Captivate is the headline, the problem that the customer has and doesn't want. They got this problem, they don't want it, and the headline, it hits that first emotion where there's a problem and somebody understands my problem. And by the way, the Captivate, or the headline, and the problem is the first thing that comes out of your mouth if you're presenting something, but it's also that the first thing they see when they can't connect with your brand or product or service. So that's the Captivate. That's step 1 of the conversion formula. Step 2 of the conversion formula is what we call Fascinate. That's the solution that they can't find. So what we found is that people buy based on emotion and then back up that emotion logically. So we have the Captivate, which is the problem, the Fascinate, which is the solution. And by the way, this is the subheadline, the second thing that they should see when they come in contact with your brand. And the third step is called Educate. This is where we explain to the prospect why our product or service is superior to the competition in every way. But we have time to do that because we hit them emotionally with the Captivate and the Fascinate. And so what we found is that people buy based on emotion and then back up that emotion logically. Well, if you look at the conversion formula, you've got Captivate, Fascinate, those are the emotional triggers. And then you have the educate, which is the logical. That's the reason why your solution is far superior to the competition. So if a spouse was to explain to another spouse why they bought a particular product or service, they, believe it or not, in rare cases, would they use the Captivate and the Fascinate? They'd use the educate because that's the logical component. And then finally, the fourth part of the formula is called the close. And the close has to be an offer. And that offer needs to be so compelling and so irresistible that the prospect can't turn it down. And there are 5 components to a compelling offer. Now, I like to go through those components because I don't want to leave the audience hanging. Anybody can say, number 4 is the close. It's an offer. It has to be so compelling that you can't turn it down. And so I don't want to leave the audience say, yeah, anybody can say that. There are 5 components to a compelling offer. And you can use either one of these components, or in my experience, it's been best to blend them together and have as many components in your offer as possible. So one is scarcity and urgency, kind of common, where you only have either so much bandwidth if you're a coach or a consultant, or you have so many units of product left if you're a retailer or a distributor. So scarcity, okay, urgency. This offer is good until Friday. So that's an actual time commitment to the offer, time limit. And so scarcity and urgency, that's the first component. The second component is risk reversal. I said that earlier, right? Where the seller in the transaction takes most or all the risk. Our ski guarantee was a complete risk reversal. We took all the risk. If they brought that ski back, we had just an old dilapidated used ski, which we couldn't do much with. So that's a risk reversal. The third component is adding more value to your product or service. So when I was in the frozen cookie dough business, the problem that the customer had, and if you notice, every time I talk about some of my experiences, I say the problem that the customer had. So in the ski business, the problem the customer had is they never really knew if the ski they were being sold was the right ski for them. In the frozen cookie dough business, the prospects didn't want to waste valuable oven space baking cookies. So if you're a pizza parlor, you don't want to put cookies in there. You want to put pizza in there because that's the core product that they have. They don't want to waste oven space. So what we did with every opening order, and we understood a critical metric. We understood the long-term value of a customer, and we believed in our product. Those are 2 critical things about what I'm about to say. Because our opening order in the frozen cookie dough business only averaged $50. But what I did is I gave away, to add more value to the product, I gave away a free convection oven that cost me $200 with every opening order. Now, I knew the long-term value of a customer was $5,000, and I believed in my product that they would reorder. And so I added more value to the product because I added something that was a problem they had with baking desserts. And by the way, they put other desserts in there too. You know, they did other things with it, but that was part of the allure. That was the advantage of and the value I was adding to a simple cookie dough order. And so that's an example of adding more value to your product or service. Now, there are better ways to add value where it doesn't cost as much. But if you do believe in your product and you understand the long-term value of a customer, you can add a lot of value on the front end. The fourth area is packaging and bundling. You know, when I was in the ski business, everybody packaged skis, bindings, and poles. And still today, everybody packages skis, bindings, and poles. And the great things about packages is that they can look different from your competitors. You know, if I put an XYZ binding in a package, a competitor will probably put an ABC binding in the package. So it looks different. And that's the great part of it. And you can utilize packaging and bundling for differentiation. It's really important for that. But what we also did is we took the best ski graphics that was selling the best, the graphics, not necessarily the ski, but the graphics that was selling the best. And we went over to the clothing department and we created packages, hat, parka, pant, sweater, and combined that one price. And they flew out the door because there's a perception of value when you package together. So packaging and bundling is another component of a compelling offer. So far we talked about urgency and scarcity. We talked about risk reversal. We talked about adding more value. And we talked about packaging and bundling. And the fifth component is what's really interesting, and it's very difficult for some people. And that is indifference to the outcome, not being connected to the sale. Because when you are connected to the sale, no matter how good you are, the customer can feel it and they automatically think that you're out for them, or you're out for yourself and not for them. And one of the strategies that can be used that I found very effective is that when you're finishing up a presentation, no matter what business, what industry you're in, one of the things you could say is whether you work with me or someone else, there are 3 steps that you must take in order to properly whatever your service is. So in my case, I would say whether you work with me or someone else, there are 5 steps that you need to take if you're going to properly implement business and financial strategies that your competition isn't doing. And I would go through those steps. And many times those steps would be very unique, a different take on the situation. And when you name those kind of things and they solve problems that customers have, you're the one who presented it. So it gives you the great advantage and it enhances the offer tremendously. So being disconnected to the outcome is the 5th.
So I understand the 5 things you were talking about that you should have to or consider one or all 5, in the compelling offer. But then we come back to how do we even put that into a message to get out there? A lot of us aren't really good at saying what we want to say, or we're not sure how to put it together, to put out those, whether it's social media, it's an email, whatever that is. So do you have tips on that?
I sure do. You have to follow the conversion formula, that 4-step process, because if you follow that 4-step process, you have Captivate, the problem, Fascinate, the solution. Real quick, problem, solution, educate, okay? Just a little bit of information about why your product or service is superior, and then the compelling offer. That compelling offer could be, like I said, you could just use, this offer is good till Friday. You could say we only have 3 left and it's good till Saturday. You could say we offer this type of a guarantee. That's a risk reversal. You could say the offer is good till Friday. We only have 3 left and we're guaranteeing the result. Or you could package it together. If you have more than one product or service, you could say this offer is a bundle. We guarantee the results. We have 3 left, and it's the offer at this price is good until Friday. So I gave a couple of examples of combining them.
Right. So to me, then it just sounds like because of how you're going to pull the information and put it together and have, these are unique or something, that alone will probably be enough, because not all of us really are good at marketing or know exactly how to say it, but because you're putting out there a message that is something they haven't heard, even if it doesn't sound perfect or, super professional, maybe because we don't have the fancy words or something, that's not as important as just getting the details out there about what you have and why it's going to be, a solution basically for your audience.
Well, you could also train AI. Okay, if you can't find the words, okay, you can download our book at nextstepscfo.net. You could put that into AI, because that book has all about the conversion formula in it and compelling offers. And you can ask it to reference that book, and you can have AI come up with the compelling offer, come up with the problems that customers have, a number of things. You can train the robot, as I call it.
Right.
So there's ways to do it if you don't have the ability.
Right. Okay, so you also talked about like the emotion that people have too. They have a problem, and you're offering a solution. Is there like a certain emotion that you want to capture though too? Do you find that it's better when you are giving them like the pleasure, or is it better to talk about the pain? Like, what do you recommend in terms of messaging? Like, what should we be going after in terms of that emotional connection?
Many studies have been done on this, and pain overcomes pleasure 2 to 1.
Okay.
So if the problem is associated with some type of discomfort, and you don't have to necessarily say pain, but discomfort, that's an emotional trigger that's tough to beat. If you go back to what I was saying about all these problems in these different industries, like in the ski industry, the problem that the customer had was they never knew if the ski they were being sold was the right ski for them. That hit a trigger because that was true. They never did know if the ski they were being sold was the right ski for them. And here they are making anywhere from a $200 to $1,000 investment, and they don't even know if the experience is going to be good or not. So when you think about that, when somebody says we give you a ski guarantee, ski the ski 3 times, that's a compelling offer because it addresses the problem. So it was really, really effective. And so if you can identify and by the way, the problem is with your industry. If you noticed, I was talking from an industry perspective. It's these problems that people have with these industries. You take the contractor industry, right? They're worried about people coming to the house. They're worried about the cleanup afterwards. They're worried about, will they come on time? Are they going to do what they said? All of that are problems in the contracting industry. So I think a lot of the problems that you can identify in your messaging have to do with problems in the industry.
Do you have recommendations on like where these messages should be, put to attract the customer? A lot of people now are just saying, I don't even need a website. I'll just use social media, or, there's certain platforms you should be focused more on than others. Like, do you have any guidance related to that?
The only guidance I have on that is that no matter what platform you use, your results will be better if you use the conversion formula. That's it. Whether I'm doing a BNI networking 60-second presentation, or whether I'm putting a post on LinkedIn, or whether I'm putting a post on Facebook, or whether I'm doing a paid ad on Facebook, or whether I'm doing an email, or whether I'm putting it on my incoming voicemail, I use the conversion formula.
Okay, perfect. So I do know you were giving things that you should be doing. Do you want to talk about maybe anything you shouldn't be doing that maybe some entrepreneurs are?
Yeah, sure. I call it I hope so marketing. And I mentioned that to a degree. And the reason why I call it I hope so marketing is because the reason why the conversion formula works so well is because most of your competition is probably using I hope so marketing, like largest selection, lowest prices, best service, most convenient, highest quality. We're the fastest. We've been in business 3,000 years. We're the experts. All of those things the customer is saying to themselves, well, I hope so. Why? Well, most professional. What am I going to deal with someone? What do I want to deal with? Somebody who's unprofessional? Highest quality. Well, do I want to deal with something? I hope so. Why would I work with something that is of lower quality? Most convenient. I hope so. Why would I want to be inconvenienced? Right. So all of that jargon that I call I hope so marketing, those are the things we must avoid. Because if you look at your competitor's website, it is probably, I'm betting, full of I hope so marketing. They're not identifying the problem the customer has and doesn't want. They're not talking about the solution they want they can't find. They're not educating them on how their product is far superior in every way to addressing that problem. It might be, and by the way, most companies start with the educate. That's why the conversion formula has to be done in the exact order, because most companies start, well, my prospect doesn't know what we do. Okay. Even painters are saying, my customer doesn't know what we do. Well, I think they know you paint. Okay. But nevertheless, they start with the educate, and it's all I hope so stuff. All of it. And it's what your competition is doing. And so you don't want to do what your competition is doing. And so that's why you want to use the conversion formula, because 95% of small business and financial strategies used today are identical to the competitors, and they don't work. And I learned that at Freedom Therapy Center.
Okay, perfect. Well, this has been very informative. I'm sure listeners are going to find this very helpful, especially you're talking about that conversion formula and doing it in that order, right? So even if you had all the things, that you were doing before, if it wasn't in the right order, that's probably why it's not really working the way that, you hoped that it would. So Thank you so much for sharing that. We are coming to the end of the topic today, or the time that we have. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, and if they want to reach out to you to connect, how can they find you?
Simply go to nextstepcfo.net. You can download a free copy of our book called Powerful Business Strategies, but you can also, because business is always changing, I'm always interviewing business owners for the next edition of my book. And I would love to interview business owners because, like I said, we know our strategies work. We just want industry information to prove what we already know. And so we have things, like inflation right now. We have interest rates. We have tariffs coming into the play, all these types of things. And we would just want to keep our information current that's in our book. And so that we keep writing additional editions. And the benefit that the interviewee gets is that they get to learn business and financial strategies that their competition isn't doing. And we ask for their opinion as how the impact the strategy would have for businesses that would implement it in their industry. And so it's a great opportunity. It's a safe place. There's no selling involved. And it's a wonderful opportunity for somebody to learn these strategies.
Perfect. So how would they reach out to you?
Nextstepcfo.net. They would go to the contact form. They would fill out the form. It's real simple, just name, information. If they want to do a book interview, there's a message box that they simply say book interview, and we're done.
Perfect.
And we'll do that.
Well, thanks again, Michael, for being a guest on my show. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had, and I appreciate your taking the time to be here today.
It was fun. A lot of fun, Candy. Thank you.
And to the guests, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.